Okay, so if you were subscribed to me before Overwatch League Season 2 began, you would know that I made a video called Burning Questions for Every Overwatch League Team. In it, well, it was exactly what it sounded like. I went over what I thought was the most pressing question for each team at the time going into the season. The question that may or may not separate these teams from success and failure. With the league coming back from its mid-season break this week, I thought it would be fun to look back at that video and see how well these teams have been answering these questions. And of course, since this is a dividing video, I'll be grading their answers as well. So one more thing before I get started, you may notice that this video is more to the point and more lightly edited than normal. This is just because I'm going out of town on Thursday and I'll be out for the weekend, so I just want to make sure that I have this ready to go before I go. So let's get going. The Atlanta Reign. Can you give Defiant the tools to succeed? This question, of course, isn't very valid anymore because Defiant left the Reign and Overwatch League in general after Stage 1. I don't blame him, honestly. Competing like this for long periods of time just isn't for him, and I can get that. So let's talk about Defiant's time while he was here. He got a starting role on the team, which I'm sure was nice. It looked like he was having fun on the stage, had his pop-off moments, gave us what is still one of the most memorable highlights in Overwatch League so far, ended up making it to the playoffs, and after losing, appeared that he left the team on good terms. For a one-stage-long career, well, we've seen worse. They seemed to accommodate Defiant pretty well, and while he was there, the Reign did quite well. So therefore, I'll give the Reign an A- on this one. The Boston Uprising. Is taking from non-traditional regions worth it? Overall, I'd say maybe? In the original video where I talked about the pickups from the Uprising, I pointed out Fusions, Color Hex, and Alamal, so how are they doing? Well, Fusions exploded onto the scene to start the season, and while he has faded into the background a little bit since Stage 1, he's still a solid starting main tank in Overwatch League, and I'd say a worthwhile investment. He's one of the main reasons why the UK is respected a lot more in Overwatch. That and a certain game that we won't talk about. Alamal hasn't seen much playtime over the Uprising veteran Kellex yet, so we can't talk much about that, and Color Hex has had, honestly, a pretty weak Zarya, but has shown ability on other heroes like Widowmaker. So, a mixed bag overall. Were there good things that came of it? Yeah. Could it have been better if they had gone more traditional? Probably. This is why the Uprising get a B-. The Chengdu Hunters. Is it too late for some of these players? As it turns out, no. In my previous video, I pointed out Yang Jiaolong and Bacon Jack, both of which hadn't played professional Overwatch in a year. But again, both of them have shown a lot of ability this season and can absolutely stand up with the rest of the league. I'm actually very interested to see if Chichiren plays in the second half of the season, and if they start to go more traditional, or if they fully commit to their unorthodox strategies. No, they're not the best team in the league, and that's why I can't really give them an A, but for a team that was rated as bottom 3 by most people in the preseason, mid-tier is pretty good. That's why the Hunters get a B+. Dallas Fuel. What is your plan with DPS? Their plan was pretty much what I thought it was, honestly. Zachary is going to be taking up the flex position, playing Brigitte and whatever else they ended up needing, like Hanzo. This still left 3 DPS players with a hitscan background fighting over that spot, and eventually AKM got the nod over Effect due to some incredible Zarya play early on. And while Effect's retirement from pro play is really sad and I wish him the best, it does help reduce the logjam at that position. However, I think if I said that DPS is still the weakest part of the Fuel, most people would agree with me. It's ended up alright, but not great, so the Fuel will get a B. Florida Mayhem. Why? Florida, I'm disappointed. I gave you probably the most open-ended and easy-to-answer question in the entire video, and I'm still scratching my head just as much as I was before. This is, of course, because I asked you what your plan was, but it seems like you've changed your plan multiple times this season. With Fate and hopefully more coming into the roster now, there's obviously a plan coming together, but not only has it been put together quickly, but it's absolutely different from the plan yet you had to start the season. We still don't know why you thought that roster would work. And for that reason, I'm going to have to give you an incomplete score. You can't just change your topic in the middle of an essay. Redo it, and just hand it back to me at the end of the season. We'll see where you are then. Guangzhou Charge. Can you successfully blend your cultures together? Well, they've done a pretty good job so far. While as of right now, the starting roster is 5/6 Korean, with Eileen or Kib coming in on the flex DPS slot, the two have integrated with the rest of the team quite well, and I've heard nothing about any sort of tensions in the team. It seems to be run very, very nicely. I'm interested to see what kinds of changes that Nero brings to this, if any. As the only American on the team, it'll be interesting to see what that brings. The Charge aren't at the top of the league, but I don't believe it's because of cultural issues. That's why I'll give the Charge an A- for now, but this could change as we enter the home stretch and things get to be their most stressful. Hangzhou Spark. Are you more than just an anime reference? I'll be honest, the Spark haven't done a great job of sticking out to me other than their colors and their game day art posts, which are awesome and have set a new standard of quality for game day art. But when I think of the Spark, I still think of them as the anime team. I don't want to think of the Spark as the anime team, I want to think of them as a really good, charismatic team that also has anime inspiration behind them, which makes them even cooler. The easiest comparison that I can come up with is early Runaway. Sure, they had the pink color scheme and that was nice, but it was their charisma and gameplay of players like Kaiser, Haxel, and Runner which really helped them stick out. The Spark just don't have that yet. Of course, there's also the humble beginnings that they had, but that's just impossible for a team like the Spark to have in a league that's required millions of dollars for a slot. Players like Gushue and IDK are giving them a good start, but they're still mostly the anime team to me, even after their semifinal finish, so I'll give the Spark a C-. Houston Outlaws. Have you done enough? No, they obviously haven't. But, contrary to my first video, where I talked mostly about the players and the roster moves, I don't think that's true. I think the Outlaws have the players with the talent and the track record to succeed. It appears that their biggest failures come from up top, in the coaches and the support staff. It never feels like the Outlaws have a plan for anything. When you watch them, they are the least organized team in the entire league at this moment. Sure, their parent company is being sold, and there's a lot to be said about the difficulties that that's causing, but Overwatch League doesn't wait for that. It's still the responsibility of the higher-ups of this team to provide the necessary resources for the Outlaws to succeed. They haven't done that, and, well, the leaderboard speaks for itself. With what looks like no improvements in the immediate future, the Outlaws get an F. London Spitfire. Are you really that good? Or just lucky? Yeah, I think I'm realizing more and more that to succeed in Overwatch League, you need to have some of both. The Spitfire have had probably the most up and down season of anyone so far. They started off looking really weak, and while they've improved a lot, they'll still drop maps and matches that they shouldn't, and it's tough to watch sometimes. While the Spitfire are still solidly on the upper half of teams, let's be honest, no one outside of the UK is expecting them to win the league right now. To be fair, that's what we thought going into the playoffs last season. Turns out, the answer to the above question is, they were a bit of both. They are quite good, but to me, it's seeming more and more like their Season 1 victory was more based off of going on a hot streak at their best time. They have time to convince me otherwise, but it's dwindling fast. The London Spitfire get a B-. LA Gladiators. How will you handle life post-fissure? Pretty well, actually. While Roar looked a little shaky to start off the season, once he got Decay at his side, the two started rolling through opposing tank lines like nobody's business. The Gladiators have actually had a similar trajectory to the Season 1 Gladiators, where they started off shaky in Stage 1 but have improved a ton since then, and most assume the Gladiators to be a top 5 team right now. While they had an early exit from the Stage 2 playoffs, Season 1 Gladiators didn't even make the Stage 2 playoffs. They're ahead of schedule. The LA Gladiators will get an A. LA Valiant. How will you handle your life post-soon? Pretty poorly, actually. I got a bad feeling when the Valiant made no immediate moves to replace their hitscan star, instead choosing to replace from within. And while soon Zarya on the Eternal hasn't been very good, Kariv and KSF haven't been very successful either. While the issues on the Valiant can't just be attributed to bad Zarya forehead, it's obvious that the team had a hole at hitscan DPS for a long time. But things are actually looking optimistic moving forward. I actually have a good amount of hope for Shaxx to come in and improve the situation, and the Valiant seem to be trending up after their coaching change. But it'll take a lot more than that to live down that 0-7. The LA Valiant get a D+. NY Excel. Was Flower worth it? Well, I don't know. We've seen Flower a total of once this season, and I'm pretty sure it was a throwaway game against the Justice, so it was mostly just for fan service. Nene has the best Zarya on this team, and he can pull out a formidable DPS as well, and this team definitely seems to have committed to Libero at Brig, so Flower's importance to this team should really only be considered once the meta shifts to include more DPS again, whether that's through a 2-2-2 lock or otherwise. Just like Pine, this just isn't the meta for him, and therefore we can't know his value just yet. That's why the NY Excel's grade is incomplete. You know what else is incomplete? You! Until you've subscribed to this YouTube channel and clicked on that notification bell so you're kept up to date on all my videos. So please do that, it would mean a lot. Paris Eternal. Can you make an all-European team work? Okay, so first of all, I think the answer is yes, you can put together a good Overwatch League team with just EU players. But did the Eternal make all the right decisions? Maybe not. When I think about the Paris Eternal, and then all the great EU players currently in Tier 2, I really do think there's a much better team to be made out there. In fact, the only player that I wouldn't really consider replacing on the starting roster is Cruz. For main tank, why not try Lulshish from the Angry Titans, or Numlock from the British Hurricane? How about Elivote on Team Envy from off tank? Grab Spectral or Davin from Giganti for hitscan DPS, or Danid for flex DPS, maybe Afox or Zupe on flex support. And that's just off the top of my head, but all of these players except Davin and Zupe proved themselves in a LAN environment at the Atlantic Showdown. And sure, while the EU teams weren't the best in that event, let's be honest, neither are the Eternal. So, to summarize, yes, I think you can make an all-European team work, but I'm not sure if the Eternal went about it in the right way. So I'm going to be giving them a solid C. Philadelphia Fusion. Can you be more consistent? Please? Well, I guess my question was answered. The Fusion are more consistent, so they should be proud of that. Unfortunately, they just aren't consistent in the ways that I want them to be. They will almost always beat the worst teams in the league. They will almost always be able to put away the mid-tier teams as well. But I really have yet to see the Fusion take down a really good team and get a win that would cement them into the top tiers of teams. In my eyes, they've settled firmly into worst of the best territory. They'll probably make playoffs, but as of right now, I can't expect them to get too far because as soon as they run into a team like the Titans, the Shock, the Spitfire, or the NY Excel, they'll probably collapse. But at least it's consistency, and since I didn't specify what kind of consistency I wanted, I guess I have no choice but to give the Fusion an A. San Francisco Shock. What's your plan? See, I went into the season thinking about the Shock in a very similar manner as the Mayhem. I mean, of course they had more straight-up firepower, but I saw a team with a bunch of pieces, and I just wasn't sure how they were going to fit them together, or if they could fit together at all. Of course, unlike the Mayhem, the Shock's plan has worked incredibly. You know, people talk about how the Shock are only good now because they're all Korean, but look at the starting roster for this team. The only players who weren't on the roster at the end of Season 1 are Rascal and Violet. The Shock have done an excellent job of not only developing their pieces from last season, but implementing the best new pieces possible to get them to succeed. We've seen it in motion for a year now, and I'm so glad to see it pay off with a Stage 2 title. The Shock get an A+. Seoul Dynasty. Can you put Lunatic High back on top? Well, back on top isn't the best way to put where the Dynasty find themselves right now. I would agree that the Dynasty are a pretty respectable team. They've gotten their first playoff berth and their first playoff win. But the question is about Lunatic High. So which former Lunatic High members are still on this team? Well, there's Zunba, who has basically been riding the bench for Michelle, and looking at Michelle's performance, I don't blame them. There's Jaehong, who is still just an okay flex support by Overwatch League standards, but he's been doing alright and is obviously a positive influence on this team. However, I'm interested to see if Hylie will be getting any playtime over him as we move forward. Finally, we have Toby, who took the starting Lucio role from Jexay this offseason and has honestly been quite good. Eichenwald is still his playground. So, while the Dynasty are looking strong this season, I can't say it's because of the Lunatic High players. While they haven't been bad, they definitely haven't been the catalyst to their success. Because of that, the Dynasty will get a B-. Shanghai Dragons. Can you manage a team? Yeah, it turns out they can. The Shanghai Dragons have had the best turnaround of anyone this season, and while any success after an 0-40 season will be celebrated, qualifying for playoffs and giving a challenge to the eventual winners, and just having general respectability in this league is awesome. Now, people will say it doesn't count as much because they're basically a new team, but I would argue that from a management perspective, wasn't blowing everything up and starting over the right move? And while picking up the core of an already established and successful team helps, for sure, I do have to come to the conclusion that, yes, the Dragons actually do know how to run a team. Did I set the bar low? Yeah, but the Dragons needed it at that point. The Dragons get an A. Toronto Defiant. Can the whole be better than the sum of its parts? If I had made this at the end of Stage 1 and all I had to go off of is the 5-2 finish and Stage 1 playoff berth, I would have said yes. But everything went downhill from there. With Stellar's retirement, I'm37 signing, and all the confusion that came with it, the Defiant looked like a very different team, and not in a good way. I'm willing to hold out hope in this team a little longer. Maybe they got it together during the break, maybe the signings of Gods and Sharik will be impactful, but you're barely scraping by right now, Defiant. Take your C- and work on it. Vancouver Titans. Can Runaway succeed against the world's best? Yes. A. Washington Justice. Can you justify your budget decisions? Honestly, the answer is no in my eyes. The Justice came out of the gate sitting where everyone thought they would be, in the back. Their playstyle was sluggish, their players were getting outperformed at pretty much every position, and they were only barely better than the Mayhem. Sure, the Justice have been showing improvement lately, but that's only after probably breaking out the wallet to pick up Arc and Sleepy. Both of these players have been benched, yes, but they are both valuable backups and I'm sure they cost a pretty penny to acquire. These are good moves, but the fact that they had to be made at all shows that the original path that the Justice chose was not the right one and cannot be justified, giving them a solid D-. And that'll do it for today. It was fun to look back on a past video and answer the same questions that I had again with all the information that I have now. Did you think I got anything wrong? Let me know in the comments. But first, if you liked this video and you want to see more, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget to click that bell too. I make competitive Overwatch content once a week, and it would make me just ridiculously happy if you'd watch it. Until next time though, that's all for me. Don't get tilted.